first thing they carried up the driveway was a mattress. That is the image I remember most clearly. Not because it was the scariest part, but because it took my brain a few seconds to understand what I was actually looking at. I was 21 at the time, and living with my older sister in a small rental house on the edge of town. She worked mornings at a dental office, and I worked evenings at a restaurant. So for a few hours in the middle of most days, I was alone in the house. It was not a huge place. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living room with a front window that looked straight onto the driveway. The landlord had put the house up for sale a few months earlier, which was annoying, but not exactly unusual. He had told us any showings would be scheduled in advance, and that the lease still ran another 4 months. So even though I hated the idea of strangers walking through the place, I was not worried about being forced out quickly. That Tuesday, my sister left for work around 7:30, and I stayed home because I was not scheduled until late afternoon. I remember sleeping in, making coffee, and sitting at the kitchen table around 10:45 with my laptop open, half looking at job postings I was not serious about applying to. Then I heard a truck outside, heavy enough that I could hear it before I saw it. I got up and looked through the front window. A white box truck had stopped in front of the house, and 2 men in dark work shirts were getting out of the cab. At first, I honestly thought they had the wrong address. Then one of them walked to the back of the truck and rolled up the door. Inside, I could see furniture pads, moving straps, and stacks of flattened cardboard boxes. The second man came up the driveway holding a clipboard. That was the moment I stepped onto the porch. He looked relieved when he saw me. "Perfect," he said. "We were told the place would be empty, but this makes it easier." I just stared at him. "What?" I said. He looked down at the clipboard and then back at the house. "Full clean out. Keys are supposed to be in the lockbox by the side gate. But if you're the current tenant, maybe you can tell me where the owner wants the stuff staged." I felt that cold, sinking feeling in my stomach you get before your brain fully catches up. "This house isn't vacant," I said. "We live here." He frowned like I had just complicated his morning. Then he turned the clipboard toward himself again and said, "I've got the address right." He read it out loud. It was ours. I told him again he had the wrong house or the wrong information. He called over to the other guy, who was already dragging a wrapped mattress toward the driveway, and said, "Hold on." Then he asked me, "Are you related to Mr. Calloway?" That was our landlord's last name. I said yes in the simplest way possible, even though the actual answer was no, because I did not want to explain anything more than necessary. "He rents this place to us. It's not empty." The guy looked genuinely confused. He flipped back a page on the clipboard. "We were told this was an abandoned holdover situation and the property had been surrendered." That phrase meant nothing to me then, but the way he said it made it sound formal enough to scare me. I told him to wait and called my sister immediately. She answered on the second ring, and I explained as fast as I could that 2 movers were outside saying they had paperwork to empty the house. Her whole voice changed instantly. She told me not to let anyone inside, and that she was calling the landlord right then. While I was still on the phone, the other mover set the mattress down on the grass by the curb and lit a cigarette, like this was going to take a while. That part made me angry. Not because he was rude, but because both of them acted like this happened often enough that it was routine. The guy with the clipboard asked if I wanted to see the work order. I said yes. He handed it over, and even before I finished reading the first line, I knew something was wrong. The property owner's name was our landlord's. The address was ours. The note at the bottom said, "Occupants no longer present/clear. All rooms and basement/owner representative to arrive later with revised lock code." No company letterhead, no official stamp, just a typed page clipped behind an invoice. I asked where he got the job. He named a local moving company I recognized from billboards around town. Then he said a woman had called that morning, claiming to be scheduling on behalf of the owner. A woman. Our landlord was a divorced man in his 60s who definitely did not have some assistant handling evictions. My sister texted me almost immediately after that and said the landlord had not ordered anything and was on his way. That should have solved it. It did not. Because at that exact moment, a dark sedan pulled up behind the box truck. A woman got out wearing sunglasses and carrying a tote bag. She walked halfway up the driveway and stopped when she saw me on the porch. Then she looked at the movers and said, "Why are you waiting?" The guy with the clipboard pointed at me and said, "She says they still live here." The woman did not look surprised. That was what made my skin crawl. She looked at me for 1 second and said, "No, they moved out." Not uncertain, not asking, just correcting me like I had gotten my own life wrong. I said, "No, we didn't." She tilted her head slightly and said, "Then why is the house listed as surrendered?" I remember that exact sentence because it sounded rehearsed, like she was not trying to win an argument so much as push everything back onto paperwork. The two movers looked caught between us, unsure whose problem this actually was. Then the woman took one more step up the drive and looked past me toward the front window. "Are your things still inside?" That question was so bizarre that for a second I did not answer. Then she said, "Can you just bring out whatever matters to you? It'll be faster." That was the moment I realized the goal was not really to move furniture. The goal was to get me to accept, even for a second, that the house was not mine to be standing in. I backed into the doorway and shut the main door behind me, leaving only the storm door between us. I stayed there until my landlord arrived about 15 minutes later. By then, the woman was gone. The movers were still there, but they had not brought anything else up the drive. Our landlord spoke to them outside while I watched through the glass. I could not hear much, but I saw him take the clipboard, read for less than 10 seconds, and immediately hand it back with a look that told me the whole thing was fake. The movers left first. Then the landlord came to the porch and told me he had never hired them, had never declared the property vacant, and had no idea who the woman was. He thought somebody had probably pulled ownership information from public records, paired it with the house for sale status, and built a story around it that sounded legal enough to pressure people into opening the door or stepping aside. What stayed with me was not the paperwork. It was how quickly everything around me almost shifted. A truck, two uniformed men, a clipboard, a woman who acted like she had the right to correct me about where I lived. Nothing about it felt real once I looked closely. But at first glance, it felt real enough that I actually had to remind myself of the simplest thing in the world. I was standing in my own house. The first car pulled into the driveway at 8:12 on a Saturday morning. I remember the time because I was still half asleep on the couch, and I had only been awake long enough to pour coffee and let the dog outside. My aunt and uncle were out of state for the weekend, and I was staying at their house to feed the dog, bring in packages, and make the place look lived in while they were gone. It was not a creepy house. It sat on a quiet street lined with maples and identical mailboxes. The only reason I was sleeping on the couch instead of the guest room was because the dog was old and hated stairs. When I heard the car door slam, I figured it was a neighbor. Then I heard another one. I looked through the front window and saw a silver SUV parked halfway up the driveway. A man and woman were getting out, both carrying empty canvas tote bags. At first I thought maybe they were there for a yard sale and had the wrong house. Then they started walking toward the front porch like they knew exactly where they were. I opened the door before they could knock. The woman smiled and said, "Are we early?" I just stared at her for a second. "For what?" I asked. She looked confused, then glanced at the man beside her. He pulled out his phone, looked at the screen, and said, "The estate sale, 8 to 4, cash only." I told them there was no estate sale there. That should have been enough, but neither of them moved. The woman actually leaned a little to the side, trying to look past me into the house. She said, "This is 214 Birch, right?" It was. Then the man turned his phone around and showed me the listing. At the top was a photo of my aunt's front porch. Under it, a short description said there would be furniture, tools, kitchenware, records, old cameras, and items from every room. The listing also said early birds were welcome and that family members would be on site to answer questions. I felt that cold drop in my stomach before my brain really caught up. I told them again there was no sale. The man frowned and said, "Somebody just posted this last night." The woman asked if maybe it had been canceled. I said I did not know, because I was too busy trying to understand why someone had taken a picture of the house and put it in a sale listing. They left after that, but slowly, like they still were not sure whether I was mistaken. As soon as they drove away, I searched the address online. The sale was real. Not real in the sense that anything was actually being sold, but real enough to everyone reading it. The post was on one of those neighborhood marketplace apps, and the photos were all of my aunt and uncle's property. The front porch, the side driveway, the detached garage, even one picture through the open back gate looking toward the patio. What bothered me most was that at least 2 of them had to have been taken from inside the property line. I texted my aunt screenshots. Then I tried reporting the listing, but the app said it would be reviewed. By 8:35, another car showed up. Then another. A woman in a red coat came carrying cash in an envelope. 2 older men arrived in a pickup and asked whether the tools were still in the garage. One teenager parked at the curb and asked if the records were mostly classic rock or if there were any hip-hop albums. At that point, I made a handwritten sign on printer paper and taped it to the front door. No sale here. Post is fake. That helped, but not enough. Most people still came up the walkway because they assumed the sign was old or meant the good stuff had already been taken inside. One man said, "Then who uploaded the photos this morning?" That part caught my attention immediately. I asked what he meant. He showed me his phone. The listing had been updated at 8:21. A new note had been added. "More items available in basement after 10. Please use side entrance if the front gets crowded." My aunt and uncle did not even have a basement. What they did have was a lower garage storage room with a separate side door built into the slope of the yard. I ran to the side window and looked down the narrow strip of driveway that led toward the detached garage. Nobody was there yet. Then I noticed something tied to the latch of the side gate, a strip of yellow ribbon. I knew it had not been there the night before because I had used that gate to let the dog out. By 9:30, I had called my friend Nolan and asked if he could come sit with me for a while. He lived 15 minutes away and said he was on his way. In the meantime, the people kept coming. Most were harmless, annoying, but harmless. They looked at the sign, apologized, and left. But a few were pushier. One guy wanted me to let him look in the garage, just to confirm there was no sale. Another woman insisted she had driven 40 minutes and asked if I could at least sell her the patio chairs because the photo made them look antique. Then, just after 10, an older man in a green jacket came to the front porch. He told me to ask for the side room. I asked who. He looked at me like I was wasting his time. "The son," he said. He said he'd be staying near the lower entrance because the family wouldn't be happy about the sale. That sentence changed the whole feeling of the morning. Until then, it had still felt like some kind of nasty prank or scam built around random buyers. Now it sounded like whoever posted the listing wanted at least some people to believe there would be conflict at the house. Wanted them moving around the property, checking side doors, looking for other ways in. I told the man to leave. He looked annoyed, but he left. Then I heard the dog barking in the backyard. Not his normal bark at squirrels or delivery trucks. Short, frantic bursts from the fence line. I went through the kitchen and looked out the back window. At first, I did not see anyone. Then I saw movement near the detached garage. A man in a dark sweatshirt stepped partly out from behind it, looked toward the house, then ducked back out of sight. He had not come through the front. He had been in the yard. I locked the back door, pulled the kitchen blind shut, and for the first time all morning, I actually felt afraid. When Nolan finally got there, I met him outside before he even killed the engine. I pointed toward the yard and told him somebody had been behind the garage. We circled the house together from outside, but whoever it was gone. The people with tote bags and cash envelopes eventually stopped coming once the listing disappeared around lunchtime. What stayed with me was not the fake sale itself. It was how cleverly it worked. A normal wrong house mistake would have brought one confused person to the door. This brought strangers all morning, each one creating distraction and making the house feel less private. And while I was busy explaining that nothing was for sale, somebody else had found a reason to be in the yard. The first car came just before 10 at night. I remember the time because I was in the kitchen rinsing out a glass when I saw headlights sweep across the front window. My parents were out of town for the weekend. My younger brother was staying with a friend, and I had the house to myself for the first time in months. The plan was simple. Eat, watch something, lock up, go to bed. Nothing about the night felt unusual until that car slowed in front of the house and stopped. I looked through the blinds expecting to see someone checking directions or turning around. Instead, the car stayed parked at the curb with the engine running. After a few seconds, the passenger door opened, and a girl about my age stepped out. She walked straight up the front path. I was already at the door by the time she knocked. When I looked through the peephole, she was standing there with her phone in one hand and a small overnight bag over her shoulder. I opened the inside door but kept the storm door shut. Before I could say anything, she asked, "Is Ryan here?" I told her no. She frowned and looked down at her phone. "This is 186 Cedar, right?" It was. She glanced back at the car, then at me again. "He told me to come here. He said the side gate would be unlocked if no one answered." That was the first thing that made me uneasy. We did have a side gate, and my dad almost never locked it because it just led into the backyard. There was no reason a stranger should know about it unless somebody had told her. I said, "You definitely have the wrong house." She stared at me for a second, clearly trying to decide whether I was lying. Then she muttered, "Great," turned around, and went back to the car. They left without another word. I locked the front door, went straight to the side gate, and checked it. It was unlocked. I latched it anyway, then came back inside and tried to shrug the whole thing off. Wrong address. Weird coincidence. Nothing more. About 20 minutes later, another car pulled up. This one was older, a dark sedan with one headlight dimmer than the other. It parked in almost the exact same spot. A man got out this time, maybe late 20s, wearing a hoodie and carrying what looked like a six-pack in a paper bag. He came up the path and knocked 3 times. I did not open the door right away. I just asked through it what he wanted. He said, "You tell people to come here and then not answer." I looked through the peephole. He was smiling, but not in a friendly way. I opened the inside door without touching the lock and said, "You have the wrong house." That smile stayed exactly the same. "No," he said. "This is the place." He took his phone out and held it up toward the glass. On the screen was a text thread. I could not read all of it through the storm door, but I saw our address clearly in one message, and the words, "Doors usually open," in another. I said, "I don't know who sent you that, but nobody by that name lives here." His expression changed slightly at that, less amused, more skeptical. Then he looked past me over my shoulder into the hallway and said, "So what? You're house sitting?" That caught me off guard. I said, "Why would you say that?" He shrugged. "Because somebody else was answering for him before." That sentence hit me wrong immediately. Not because it made sense, but because it implied this was not the first person who had shown up expecting the house to be some kind of meeting place. I told him to leave. He stood there a second longer, then said, "Tell Ryan he's funny," and went back to his car. After that, I turned off every downstairs light except the lamp in the living room. I also called my mother, but she did not answer. I sent her a text explaining that random people had shown up asking for someone named Ryan. Then I checked every door and window again, including the basement entrance at the back of the house we barely used. Everything was locked. At 10:52, someone tried the side gate. I went to the kitchen and looked through the dark over the sink. I could not see the gate itself from there, only the narrow strip of yard leading toward it and the back corner of the fence. Nothing moved. Then, from the front of the house, came another knock. Not on the main door, on the living room window. I did not go near it. A minute later, my phone buzzed. It was my mother finally answering the text. I called her immediately and told her everything. She thought at first it might be some old friend of the previous owners using the wrong address. But when I told her about the side gate and the second man mentioning someone answering for him before, she told me to leave and stay with my aunt for the night. I said I would. But before I could grab my keys, headlights flashed across the back fence. Another car had pulled into the alley behind the house. That was what made me panic. Our backyard backed up to a narrow alley used mostly for garage access and trash pickup. Almost nobody drove through it that late, unless they lived directly behind us. I went upstairs instead of out the front. From my parents' bedroom window, I could see over part of the backyard and into the alley beyond the fence. A dark pickup had stopped there with its lights off now. I could not see the driver. Then I saw movement at the side gate. Somebody was standing there from the inside of the fence line. For a second, I could not understand what I was looking at. Then I realized the gate had swung inward. Someone had come into the yard. He was only visible from the shoulders up above the fence, but I could tell it was a man wearing a cap. He was standing still, facing the back of the house like he was waiting for a signal. I backed away from the window so fast, I hit the dresser behind me. Then came a sound from downstairs. That door opened into a storage room off the back hall, and almost nobody used it except my dad. Whoever was outside not only knew there was a second entrance, they knew it might be easier than the front. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and my backpack, went out onto the small roof over the porch through the upstairs office window, and climbed down the trellis my mother always wanted removed. It was stupid and awkward, and scraped up both my hands, but it got me off the porch without using either downstairs door. I ran to my car parked one house down because I had left it on the street instead of the driveway. As I started it, I looked back once. The front door area was still empty. But in the side yard, just beyond the fence, I saw the top of that cap move toward the back of the house. I drove straight to my aunt's place and stayed there until my parents came home the next day. We never found out who Ryan was or why our address was being given out. What stayed with me was how confident every person seemed. Not confused, not lost, just inconvenienced that I was standing where they expected someone else to be. And once enough, strangers start showing up certain a house is the right one. It does not matter that you know they are wrong. It still stops feeling like your house.